Okay, I'm going to do a little quick tutorial on how to get an animated door into 7 Days to Die using Unity. So the first thing I want to do is go to the Unity Asset Store, look up free doors, and come across Classic Interior Door Pack 1. Add it to my assets because it's free. I like free. And then it shows up here in JJ Interior Door Pack 1. Click on prefabs. Let's just grab this red door right here, drag it into the scene. We say, oh, that's not really that red. I'm going to go ahead and unpack it by right-clicking it, hit the prefab, and unpack completely. This allows me to work with the actual prefab itself and not a copy of the prefab. You see now it's black, and I like that a whole lot better. Alright, to start, on any block that I import into 7 Days to Die, I have something called a reference cube. In this case, it is this puppy right here. It is set to 0, -1, and 0. What it does is it represents the floor of a in-game voxel space, because remember the game is a voxel game, it's all a bunch of cubes. Alright, so that means anything above here is above the ground, anything below here is below the ground. So we don't want anything up, we don't want the door going down here at all. Now let's take a look at the door itself. I'm going to go ahead and open it up a little bit. We got J door, 1 red, door wing, door knob. Well, the door, this seems to be the slab, so I'm just going to hit F2 and rename it. And this seems to be the frame, so I'm just going to go ahead and F2 and rename it. And obviously the doorknob is a doorknob. So when I'm looking at the frame, well, I see it's way over here, not anywhere near my voxel space, right? Because it's off 1.99, 180, 288, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to reset that. That way it's 0, 0, 0. So as you can see, though, it sinks a little bit into the ground. So if I were to place this in the game, it's going to sink into the ground because we want it above our ground plane right here, the top of this cube. So I'm literally going to make sure that the frame is selected, and I'm going to drag it up. So you see it's just a little bit sticking into the ground a little bit. Let's see what happens if I make it let's see, 0.555. That's a little too high. That's probably good. Let's just leave it 0.55. Alright. So that assures it's no longer sticking to the ground. But you do see it sticking off to the left and to the right. I'm going to fix that. Or maybe I won't. I also want to check the top, right? So I have another block cube, another reference cube I stuck at too high, and this represents the top high block. And you can see the door slab frame definitely sticking to the top block by quite a bit, and I don't want that either. So I'm going to take my frame and I'm going to squish it just a little teeny tiny bit, because I actually don't mind the frame being in the other voxel space, and I'll go into great more detail about that later, but I definitely mind the slab being in the other voxel space. So looks like I need to lower the entire thing a little bit more. So I'm going to change that to that, and maybe go like .54, see what happens. Maybe .3. Okay, that seems to be about right. So right now I'm focusing on the slab not being in another voxel space more so than I am the frame. And the reason why is because when you actually build in game, you're going to have another floor place over here. You'll have a wall here, wall here, wall here, wall here. I like the frame mesh to kind of poke into the nearby blocks just a little bit. That way it ensures that there's a tight seal. You'll see Vanilla does this with Ember piles as well. When you look at an Ember pile, the mesh size actually exceeds the voxel space allotted for that block. So that way when you put multiple Ember piles next to each other, it kind of looks like one giant Ember pile, rather than something like grass, where it basically when you put grass down, it's pretty clear. It takes up it's one per cube. Now you could take a bunch of grasses, overfill the cube with it, and then that way you have a nice plain field. But that's besides the point. We're here to talk about doors. So now I've got my door kind of set up and sized and positioned exactly where I want it to be, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create an empty object. I'm going to call it gup door test. I'm going to set that object to 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, and then I'm going to drag my entire frame into my empty object. That means this is the parent and these are the children. You never, ever, ever, ever change these numbers up here in the parent. Leave them all the same. If you're going to change something, change the children. If I need to drag it over a little bit, I would change the child, not the parent. And put it back. Okay, now I need to animate it. Okay, so when I'm looking at the animations, there's only thing I really want to open is the door slab itself, right? So if I have the frame set up and I click rotate, it rotates the whole thing. And I don't really want that for this type of door. I want it for the slab. Now, luckily in this particular object that we've gotten for free, the pivot point is exactly where we want it to be. That way when we open the door slab, it opens exactly like we want it to do, right? Sometimes you might find that it's somewhere else, and then we need to create our own pivot point. And the way I would do that is I'd go create it empty, I'd call it say pivot, I'd move it to, you know, where I want it to go, and then I would drag the slab underneath it, and that way I'm pivoting just my pivot point, which drags the slab. Now you can see that didn't work out too well, and the reason why is it's in the world and local. There's all sorts of problems with that this tutorial is not going to cover. But I'm going to go ahead and put this back in here, get rid of my pivot point, and then just use the one that already came with the game, put it back on the frame. That way it pivots exactly where I want it to pivot. Okay, so that's, again, the whole pivot point thing is something you're going to need to suss out for yourself because it's going to be different for every object you do. If I were to do it, I would, let's see, pivot here to global, here, put it down here, put it down here, and then move my slab over here, and then rotate. I don't know, you basically have to play with that a bunch of times. Get rid of that. So, garbage. I got my door, I got my frame, I got my slab, which has a great pivot point, and I got my door knob. So I want my doorknob to pivot with the slab, so I'm going to make sure it stays as a child. Otherwise, when I pivot my slab, the doorknob stays the same. We don't want that. So we're going to keep the doorknob inside the slab. That way when I pivot my slab, it comes with it. So I'm going to start my animation on the child right above the slab. So in this case, it's going to be the frame because it's the next one up, right? I'm going to go to animation and I'm going to click create. And I'm going to call the first one and do this in order because it's going to make your life easier. Close static. You can name them whatever you want, but this makes the most sense to me. And this de-animation that basically keeps it closed the entire time. So whenever you walk up to a door in 7 Days to Die and the door is closed, it's actually running an animation. The animation is just not moving anything. And I'm going to add a property to the slab, to the transform, to the rotation. What that does is it sets up a key here, and 1 second later a key here. When I press play, it does absolutely nothing, which is exactly what we want because this is the static closed door animation. This keeps it closed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and highlight the key and hit Control C, and that way I'm going to copy these values, right? Because now I want to open the door. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to create a new clip, I'm going to call it open. And then I'm going to Control V, which starts the key in the closed static position. I'm going to go 1 second over, click record, and then I'm going to rotate this. Right now it's at 360 degrees. I'm going to open 90 degrees, so 360 plus 90 is 450. All right. Unclick record. That way over here it's set to 360 and then it goes to 450. Right? Clicking play, the open animation literally opens the doors. Perfect. Exactly what we want. So now I'm going to go, I got my 450, I'm going to Control C it because now I'm going to make an open static. Create new clip, open static. Alright. And then I'm going to Control V it twice over here and then over here. Alright. That means all this does is it keeps the door open. Make sense? Perfect. Awesome. Make the last animation, which is going to be called close. Now, because I already have the open static parameters copied, all I'm going to do is hit Control V, and you'll see that it starts off as open, but now I want it to go to the close position. So I'm going to cheat on that too. I'm going to go to close static. I'm going to Control C that one, go back to close. Don't like how Unity does this. Go to my 1 second mark and then hit Control V. Now closes it. Perfect. Exactly what we want. So I have 4 animations: close, close static, open, and open static. Alright, so now I want to put this in the animation controller. Go back to what animation controller is. This is where I started. Frame, got an animator. Click animator. Now I got my controllers. my animation states. Start off, I wanted to go to closed, I wanted to go to open, open static, closed, like this, right? So I wanted to go from closed static to open static to close. And the way I do that is I basically set transitions. So I right click the orange one, which is the default transition, make a transition here, make a transition here, make a transition here, make a transition here. All right? So now, when I click play, you'll see it's going to go through all 4 of the different transition states. And over here, it's opening, closing, opening, closing, because it's nothing in there is stopping it from doing this loop. Open is set to the open animation, open static is set to the open static animation, close to the close, and then close static to close static, right? So I'm going to unplay that. So when you go up to the game and you hit E to a door, it uses TFP code to send 2 animation parameters to the animation controller. Those 2 parameters are, 1, it sends a trigger. So I'm going to click the plus here, click trigger, called open trigger. The O and the T are capitalized. Then also sends a boolean, which is a true false, called is open. The is and the open are capitalized. Okay? So anytime you hit E, it does these 2 things to the game, right? So now I have to tell our animation controller what happens when you hit those E's, right? So if I want to go from close to open, I click the little arrow connecting to it, and I want to say, okay, open trigger and is open is true. I want it to automatically go to open static, so I'll leave that alone. I want to have to hit something again to go to close. So in this case, it's the open trigger again, but this time is open needs to be false. And then I want it to automatically go to the close trigger. Now watch what happens. Okay, so the door is sitting there because these conditions have not been met yet, right? So the door is sitting there. You hit E, it sends an open trigger and sets open trigger to true. The door opens. It automatically goes to open static, but now we want to hit close, right? So we need to send another open trigger to it, which is what happens when you hit E, and this time is open, it sets to false. Technically this will work with just the triggers, but then other players on a multiplayer server will not see the door open and close. That's why you need the boolean. So both these things are required. All right, Zith, you got it? All right, cool. A lot of my doors didn't have the bool, so my doors kind of sucked for a little bit. Got that straight, though. Anyway, so that's basically how you make the doors work. You hit E, these 2 condition parameters get hit. Voila. And that is how you set up the animation for doors. Now, one thing you will see, though, is that this door is actually set to the middle of this thing, right? So when I hit, let me hit frame. When I hit open, it opens the door slab outside of the voxel space. Very, very, very bad. That means when you're in game, from here on out won't be interactable, even if there's a collider, because it's not inside the assigned voxel space, right? So all I'm going to do in this situation is I'm going to take the frame, I'm just going to move it back. That's all I'm going to do. And it won't mess up any of my animations because my animation's only affecting the slab. That way I can still open it and blah, 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 right? Now you see it still leaves a little open, a little more space to deal with. So I'm going to keep the frame and move it back just a little teeny tiny more. All right? Now, you can see though that my door slab is outside of the voxel space over here just a little bit. But it's inside the voxel space on the top, inside the voxel space on the bottom. So this is where the colliders come in. So since I only want the slab to have the collider, now you could actually get really funny and put the doorknob as a collider, but we're not going to do that because then people can just walk through the door anyway. But so we have the slab as the collider. I'm going to add a collider to it. And then I'm going to add a box collider. And I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to make sure that these green boxes are inside the total voxel space. Now, I'm going to move this stuff just a little teeny tiny bit. This one's already down. I know left and right's covered, left's covered, but I know when I open my door, it's not correct. So I need to squish it in a little bit. Now, where's my slab? Edit collider. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I see what's happened. That's interesting. Oh, the actual collider size shifted. That's not supposed to happen. at all. That's something that's would suck because basically you would try to go close the door, and because the collider is so small, it wouldn't actually close. Why is that, I wonder? Oh, because I set it to 2D. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that component, add the component, box collider. Edit it again, squish it up a little bit. Now it'll actually move with the door. Okay, so just to make sure it stays in the voxel space, I'm going to push it in just, oops, slab, edit collider, grab the little green box here, move it in just a little bit. That way, at all times, the collider, which is the important part, is inside the assigned voxel space. Now, when you go to the XML in the game, you're going to see it has a property called multi-dim. That's multi-dimensional, and that's how you tell the game what voxel spaces to assign to the block you're putting into the game. In this case, it's going to be 1, 2, 1. That means it's going to be 1 wide, 2 high, and 1 front and back. Now, if I took this door frame and had it over here, when the door was open, people would not be able to interact with the slab because it's outside of the assigned voxel space. Excuse me. So make sure you're opening and closing animations. The collider is completely within the assigned voxel space. All right. And then I'm going to take my slab, I'm going to tag it. I like to use T-Mesh-B. A lot of people are switching to B-Mesh. Don't really know the difference. And then that is it. I am done with this door. And everything looks good to me.